Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Carley Weissert, welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. So happy to have you on today.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I love talking a little bit in the pre-show about things we're going to talk about. I get excited. So you are, I'm calling you a confidence coach. I think it's more expansive than that. It's really kind of like I'll call you a revolution coach, but a confidence coach, helping people find their voice, helping maybe even people step into their power. And that was because you went through quite a transition or I'd say even a transformation over the last 4 years-ish. No coincidence that COVID was part of that time frame, right? And I think I've talked to many people on the show where obviously that was a catalyst for life change, myself included. You know, we had a big life shift during that period of time for the better. Didn't always seem like it in the middle of it. So if you're listening to the show today, we're going to talk about this kind of transformative process. And really, I think no matter where you're at, if you're dissatisfied with the results you're getting in life, if you had that internal angst, is I guess the way I would look at it, is kind of because I had that and still have little moments or relapses of that internal angst that just says, "Is this really the life I'm supposed to be living?" Right? Because
Mhm.
and it's just and I think so many of us ask that question, but it sometimes gets so loud, it's like, "Is this really it? Is this the life that" if I look in the magazines, if I'm watching TV, if I'm looking at social media, this is the thing that everybody says is supposed to be the great thing. I've got the house and the cars and the family stuff or the job that I and but yet I still feel like that this isn't it. This doesn't feel right or it doesn't quite fit, and I think most of us can relate to that feeling of internal questioning, but this is even more than that. I think this is more of that internal identity almost issue, right? Is this who I truly am? Not only is it what I'm supposed to be doing, but is this truly who I am at my core? And so with that, Carley, welcome to the Bright Vibe podcast. Feel free to chime in. Kind of what's your story?
Yeah. Well, I can very much relate to everything you just spoke to. And yeah, that internal angst that you were just
Hmm.
mentioning. Like I called it like my little whisper. I had this
Hmm.
whisper. And so really kind of backpedaling to start of the pandemic, I've always really been into personal development and
Right.
transformational work.
Hmm.
I kind of started to dive back into it in the fall of 2019. Then the
Hmm.
pandemic hit,
Hmm.
shut the world down, and I dove in even more because there
Yeah.
wasn't all that much to do.
Right.
It was a great time to just do some more inner work, and I know I'm not alone in that, but,
Hmm.
I had been just really starting to peel back the layers of myself and
Hmm.
dig into patterns and things that had kind of run my whole life up until that point. Lots of people pleasing, perfectionism tendencies, things like that. And as I was kind of digging into myself and doing this healing work, I had this whisper.
Hmm.
And it just felt like something like very much that like, is this it? Is this my life? Is this what I actually want? Because I had thought for a really long time that that's
Hmm.
what I wanted. I had created my life up until this point to be a certain way. And as I started to learn more about me, I was realizing more and more that everything I had created was to meet other people's expectations and to check other people's boxes. And I just kind of was slowly waking up until this whisper that for a long time I could ignore because it was so quiet and life was so loud and busy and
Right.
that it
Yep.
was easy to just be like, I'm just gonna, go through the motions, keep doing the thing I'm doing, follow
Hmm.
the least resistance. And with the pandemic and then all of this attention I started to put on me, the whisper got louder and louder until I say like she got a megaphone and was just like banging on the drum. I couldn't ignore it anymore.
Right.
And eventually the discomfort of making a change in my life, and in my case, this was ending my marriage,
Mhm.
was the scales tipped, and that became less uncomfortable than
Mm.
staying in this life that I had created, that I had outgrown, this the version of me that I had grown into and, just kind of discovered just didn't fit into this life that I had made, and it was a really challenging time. It was very messy,
Mhm.
and I had lots of moments of like, "Oh my god, what am I doing? What did I just do? Why did I do that?" Like, just lots of questioning, and it's been about 2 years
Mhm.
since I, said the words out loud, "I don't wanna be married anymore," and I I don't have any regrets at all. I feel more like myself than I ever have, and
Mhm.
it's been wild, but worth it.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, the wild part, right, is always that can be very uncomfortable and feel very negative, I think, or at least it did for me going through some of those things. But to your point, on the other side of any type of transition, if we lean in, there's usually positive outcomes on the other side of that transition if we choose to see them that way and we embrace life. If we choose to not see them as positive, then it turns into a victim story, and this is what happened to me, and this is horrible, and the rest of my life's defined by that, right? I was actually walking. I my daily kind of therapy is hiking in the woods. So every day, pretty much every day, I'm in the woods in the morning, first thing, and hiking. And this morning, I was kind of just pondering the question, which I have off and on, but it was really, kind of back to what you were talking about. Life is so noisy. Life is so noisy and so full of distractions. It's so full of shiny objects and this thing and that thing, and it's like there's this sense of urgency, and it's like, but where are we racing to? Where are we racing to? Right? Because ultimately we're racing to death. That's where we're headed, folks. It's this isn't as I mean, it's still a shock to say it, but everybody knows it's true. We all ignore it and pretend like it's not. But the race is ultimately we die. That's where the race leads. There
Yep.
is no other outcome that we have found so far from a technology standpoint that leads to anything but death. And so, but yet we run like where I have run. I'm going to say we to some degree, but we have run this race um, just for the sake of running it because everybody else is running it, and that's what we're taught, and that's what we grew up with, and that's how you get ahead, and that's how you have the nice things, and that's how you send your kids to college, and that's a blah blah blah. The list goes on and on. But ultimately, it all ends in death. So it's like, so what are we running so fast for? Right? Slow is good, right?
Yeah.
At least I'm giving you my opinion. But but so what was your experience through this kind of so you went from you're married, you've got a couple kids, you've got a house, you've got a golden doodle, I think. I've got a golden doodle I can relate. Um, so you've got this life, and then COVID hits and you start this little whisper gets louder. And then you realize that you've got to change some things. But I guess then what was that process like for you?
Oh, it very bumpy, very rough.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, but it did, to your point, it required a lot of slowing down
Mm-hmm.
and getting quiet and being with myself and tuning out all of these opinions, this conditioning, everything that comes at you from
Hmm.
the world about how your life should look. And there's a lot
Right.
of that
Yep.
in our culture, especially for women of like, okay, well,
Uh-huh.
you should be this kind of wife and this kind of mom and do these things, and listening to that is what got me to this life that from the outside looking in, what, like, checked all the boxes. It was very, like, American dream kind
Mm-hmm.
of 2 kids, a dog, the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing. And, so the process of kind of, like, dissembling that
Mm-hmm.
life was it was long and slow and a little, like, painful at times, if I'm being totally honest. It wasn't this walk in the park where I just realized, like, "Oh, this isn't aligned. I'm gonna do this now," and, like, everything
Right.
fell into place. If
Right.
it was that easy, everyone
Right.
would would do that.
Right.
But it required a lot of, again, like, just being with myself, of trusting myself and knowing that, like, it really my relationship to my, like, higher power
Mm-hmm.
really came into play through all of
Mm-hmm.
this. It wasn't something that I really had much of,
Right.
there, and,
Mhm.
I had to lean on it and just trust that by listening to myself and my own inner voice, I was ultimately listening to my higher power and
Mhm.
were guiding me, and that everything was, even the hard, sticky parts, it was all happening for me, not to me. Like,
Mhm.
viewing life through that lens was so important through
Right.
the transition, and it's still how I
Mhm.
choose to operate. I think it's a really empowered place to come from.
Mhm.
But, yeah, it was lots of challenging conversations, lots of time focusing inward and really rooting in myself and trusting at the end of the day that I do know what's best for me and I need
Mhm.
to follow that even if I can't see like exactly where I'm going, exactly what's on the other side, just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and that's what got me here today.
Mhm. And through that transition, I'm curious if this is, if you had some of this experience, but I have found that I had to kind of, unlearn or let go of a lot of past beliefs and past ways of operating for me to find it's like I can't. Well, I went through an executive leadership course. It was like an MBA course, and the first thing they showed us was basically Tiger Woods, and he got to a point of success, and then he realized that be he couldn't go on with his career and do even greater things if he didn't totally revamp his swing. And so
Mm.
the talk was the swing that got you here will not drive you forward. The thing that made you successful to this point in time, if you want these other things that are outside of your comfort zone or beyond what you know today, then you got to do something different. Otherwise, you're just going to have the same swing. You're going to have the same exact life. And I think in a lot of instances, I probably failed to move forward with my life because I didn't wanna let go of the identity I'd built because I'd built so much stock into it, right?
Mhm.
Whether it was, work or reputation or whatever the case, there you put any label on it, success label, whatever, and it was like that was the risk was that that would all have to go away or that somehow all that part of me would die, and, I mean, there was real for me, there was just real sheer terrifying fear in that transition from the old to the new. It wasn't a very smooth transition. It was more like pulling teeth and hitting me with a bat and blood and guts and snot and tears. And I mean, it was like a really gory mess. Um, but it had to happen for that. Another example I can think of is kind of like when the butterfly, and this is, a cliche example, but when the butterfly or the caterpillar turns into the butterfly, at one point, all the cells in the caterpillar have to completely realign themselves and completely rearrange for it to be a butterfly. And to some degree, that's kind of what it felt like. Like
Mhm.
my world had to pretty much, I kind of had to lose me to find me, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I love that butterfly analogy
Mhm.
because it literally turns to mush in
Right.
the chrysalis, like,
Hmm.
in that transition, and it has to, but we get, like, to your point with identities and stuff, like, it's so human for us to get so attached to these identities that we created. Our ego, like, we just latch on, and I think about the butterfly
Hmm.
example, and, like, some of us get so attached to being a caterpillar that we won't let go, and if you don't let go, you can't turn into that
Right.
butterfly, and I had I feel like a completely different human being, a
Hmm.
completely different woman than I was definitely 4 years ago, 2 years ago. I mean, honestly, even 6 months ago, it's this constant evolution, and,
Right.
um but my to your point, like, things that had worked really well for me for a long time stopped working, and it where there's, like, people pleasing, like,
Hmm.
and just saying yes and stuff, and it worked well. I got like, people liked me, I got things that I wanted, I avoided conflict, it was all great, but eventually, after, like, years and years and years of that,
Hmm.
and I finally kind of was in this waking up stage. I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. It was this whole rediscovery process for me because I had created this person who did all the right things and looked really good and was
Hmm.
well liked and created all of this stuff. But I was like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Like, and
Hmm.
it just stopped. It stopped working. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and so, yes, it's so and I'm just belaboring that, obviously, to some degree so that people understand that this isn't yeah, it's to your point, it's not this oh, I'm just gonna change it. I'm just gonna do this other thing. And it's like, no, there's lots of momentum that's behind your identity and behind an identity when it comes to a certain point where, and then if it chooses to change, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of, to your point you said earlier, working on yourself, focus, meditation, journaling. I mean, there's, and I've seen this, it, whether it's in this situation, I've seen this with, businesses themselves as an organization. I've seen this with high functioning business leaders, people that lead, not-for-profit organizations. It's almost like you can't be successful until there's like this. You can't truly be successful or feel fulfilled. Maybe is a better way to put that. You're never going to be fulfilled until you go through this process. It's like a rite of passage, and I don't. And nobody escapes it. Nobody gets out of it. You can get stuck and get like there's for people that have studied the hero's journey. His name will come to me, but, the hero's journey model is basically that you gotta go through this, like, dark night of the soul type experience, and I always used to kind of be like, "Oh, yeah, I've done that. it was a Tuesday 3 years ago, I" right? And then when I actually got to the dark night of the soul, I was like, "Holy shit, is this ever gonna end? Like, this is not the dark night of the soul. This is an eternity of yuck," right? And this was for me, it was months and probably a good solid year if I went back and actually said, "Okay, from here to here, this was really bad." But the dark night of the soul was, like, literally this whole questioning who I was, questioning all my abilities, questioning my past, questioning my future, thinking everything that I touched was now that had turned to good was now turning to bad. I mean, it was just a whole mess of stuff, but that had to happen. And when I get other people, that come on the show or I read books or I look at other everybody that does anything of significance has to go through this process. There's no skipping or no getting around it.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It is like a rite of passage, like an initiation
Yeah.
from
Mhm.
one version of yourself to another. And I think, like, at least in my experience, it was like I lived, the first third ish
Mhm.
of my
Mhm.
life, like, as someone else. Like, it wasn't actually me. I had to go through this dark night, and mine was very much like
Mhm.
if it had been one night, it would have been amazing, but it was very
Right, yeah, yeah.
like
Like,
a
that was
year.
the best. Wow, that was crazy, but that was cool.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly, yeah, I'm like, "Okay,
Right.
I'll do that again."
Yeah, exactly.
But, yeah, it was a long process, and I when I was in the thick of it, it was awful and,
Mhm.
like, so, um like, I didn't know up from down. I just really was, like you said, questioning everything,
Mhm.
and but it was so I not happily, but I would do
Yeah, no, I get it, yeah.
to to become the person that I am now, to have the life that I have created, the relationships I have, like, just all of it was so worth
Mhm.
not only that dark night of the soul period, but everything that I had done up until that point. Because I did in my own journey with this, I don't know if
Mhm.
you can relate, but it was lots of, I wish I had been different or done
Mhm.
this sooner or
Yeah,
what
yeah,
all those
110%.
regrets.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I wouldn't be this version of me without all those other previous versions. So it's again going back to that everything's happening for me and trusting in my higher power that this path that I'm on is exactly the one that I'm meant to be on. And
Mhm.
it's hard to lean into that sometimes when
Yes.
you're in the middle of it, but
Yeah, totally.
hindsight's 2020.
And I think, yeah, it's so easy to look outside and compare, right? That person's life looks great, or that person's life looks great, or wow, I just wish I, had that or that. And that's just such a slippery slope of not good stuff versus realizing that no, what you just said, we're exactly where we're supposed to be when we're supposed to be there.
Mhm.
It's just do we have the awareness that we're where we're supposed to be, when we have to be there, and even in the midst of the, I didn't have that perspective when I was in my lowest points. I didn't. I couldn't think like about a future much at all. It was just trying to survive, minute by minute, day by day, to just hopefully something better was going to come along or not, right? I mean, I was kind of, but as I've kind of come through that, looking back again, I wouldn't trade it for the world, and it was definitely worth it. I would never wanna do it again, right? But there is a freedom on the other side, and, that's just not the same freedom that I'd ever experienced before. You
Mhm.
know, a freedom of being able to be open to new ideas and new thoughts and new ways of being that had I not gone through that period of time, I could have never let go of, because I was like, I would have liked to have thought I was an enlightened human being before this process started, but that was BS, right? That was an enlightened ego. That was just an enlightened way of hanging out in the world with some concepts and some philosophy and no real connection with God or no real connection with my inner self. I mean, I was just moving too fast, right? It was, and so yeah, so I guess I'm kind of wandering around here a little bit, but ultimately, I just want to reassure anybody who's listening that maybe they've already gone through this, and if they have, great, help others, right? In
Mhm.
fact, Bruce Fuller came on my show here about a month or two, probably 2 months ago. He wrote a book called Lifequakes. It was all about this. It was fascinating. He's written so many bestsellers, but the Lifequake book was super interesting to me because he talked about this very thing we're talking about. Every human being 2 or 3 times throughout the lifespan, if they live an average lifespan, 2 or 3 times throughout their lifespan, they go through these life quakes, and these life quakes are major interruptions in whatever's happening in their life, and it can be because of an illness, a heart attack, stroke, things like that. We hear that. That's, somebody turns their life around because they've been hospitalized, or cancer is a big one that's a catalyst for this type of change. But what I didn't realize is he said typically it's a 4 or 5-year process. Like, most people, it's not like you quit your job and then you get another job. That's not a life quake, right? It's where you quit your job and then you have a series of crappy jobs and then you start to question everything and then your life's kind of in disarray. And then my favorite part of it was, and then he said, and then you think you have it figured out and then you don't. And then, and then you transition into the new way of being, right? He said, but typically that's when he interviewed several hundred people. He was like, that's a 4 to 5 year process. And it actually was a sense of relief for me. I was like, oh, I'm actually normal, right? Right? It was like, "Oh, I'm not this 4 or 5 year," because it's been about I'm tracking about the same time frame you are. Mine started a little bit before COVID and lasted I'm still recovering. But, um, but yeah, it's like, this is normal, and I wanna just reiterate this on the show. This is normal for people to go through this. It's just he kinda looked at the people that went through this and they didn't recover, and then the people that when I say recover, they didn't fully make the transition because they pulled back to a position that wasn't the end of the transition.
Yeah.
They went back to the same thing. They went back to the same job. They went back to the same way of thinking or being, and then it was a life of apathy versus people that actually were able to see that there was light at the end of the tunnel and make it through, go on to do really cool things with their lives. And that could be just raising great children or right or having a great family, or it doesn't have to be, you know, saving orphans in India or climbing some great big high mountain, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so anyway,
Yeah, no, I love that. I haven't I sounds like I need to read this book, but I
I
love
haven't read it either. It sounded really interesting when you
yeah.
described it though.
The timeline of it though is very like you said, because that's what I've been feeling in myself really over the past, like, maybe 6 months, maybe
Mhm.
even less, like, really feeling like, "Okay, I'm starting to, like, really get my feet under me here."
Yep. Yep.
And, it did feel like very much this, like, inner monologue of, like, "This is, like, what's wrong with me? Like, why is
Mhm.
this taking so long? What's
Right.
happening?"
Yes. Totally for me. Yep.
Yeah, and it is though, like, at the end of the day, whatever I end up doing in my
Mhm.
life, the impact I'm having, like, as long as I think the most impactful thing that you can do as a human is just live an aligned life. When you're in
Mhm.
aligned,
Right.
whatever that is for you, then you are positively impacting those around you. You're giving permission to other people to make shifts that they need to make for themselves and pursue their own passion, their joy, or whatever. And maybe it is saving orphans in India, or
Yeah,
maybe it's
maybe it is. Yeah.
raising like a really incredible human being who will then grow up to save orphans in India. Like you just
Right.
never
You
know,
never
right?
know. Right.
Ripple effects, and it's just staying true to yourself, I think is the it's a gift to the world, to yourself and to those around you.
And I started looking at and I haven't read the whole book, but I started looking at the 12 steps. I was really good at drinking when I was younger, but I was never truly didn't drink at home or alone or things like this. I was just a very good social drinker, in a not great way. But I looked at some of these 12 steps of the 12 step program. And I was like, some of this stuff really makes sense. Like believing in, a God, or my understanding, or my understanding of what God is, right? Believing in a higher power,
Mhm,
forgiveness for myself, right? Forgiving myself of and admitting the things that I've done, and then also forgiving myself for the things that I've done, right? And then really asking others. I think I'm at the stage where I'm getting ready to ask more and more people for forgiveness, but I made the list, started thinking of the list in my head the other day. I was like, nope, this is going out on a social post because my list is way too long, right? Once you get past 5 or 10 people, I'm like, I don't have that's a lot of there's it's like, I'm sure I have pissed off people I don't even know,
mhm.
right? So at what point do I just need to apologize to basically the face of the earth? It's just like, "Please share this post. I know that if I've offended anybody." But these things have so much, you know, we've kinda looked at or I've kind of pointed us in this kind of the hard part of it, but the other side, I don't know what your experience is of lately, but, you talk about it seems like even 6 months ago, it's just going so quickly, this transformation, and
Mhm.
I'm like, it's hard not to just be happy all the time. I mean, I have to, like, really find a way to get pissed off, to get angry. I mean, it's like, it's just hard not to it's just there's a lot more. I was relaying this the other day. It feels like that even though there's challenges and there's issues, I still get irritated and angry and mad. But it seems like more often than not, the default's now joy or peace or happiness or laughter, and it kind of crowds out the stuff that's negative. At least for me, it's at least I'm in that process of the crowding out where it's like, oh wait, and it's not even a mental thing. It's more of just it's happening.
Mhm.
You just find more joy when you're more probably free to be who you are in alignment, like you're talking about. Like when you're aligned, there's just more joy.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've, expanded my capacity for joy
Mhm.
in my life for sure, and a lot of that comes from, um, just being really rooted in gratitude, like,
Right.
just so grateful for what I have now because I know what I had to go through to
Mhm.
get it.
Right.
And, like, grateful for the big things, grateful for the little things, like,
Mhm.
I mean, I have, like, habits of, like, I, like, thank the traffic lights when I, like,
Yeah.
hit greens in a row, I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
thank you," like, just
Yeah,
little
exactly.
like that,
Yep.
it such
Mhm.
a big difference. But I do so I have expanded capacity for joy, but I also feel something for me through my whole process was just being able to feel all of my emotions more deeply because I really didn't let myself kind of fully feel some of the, like, the yuckier emotions, right? Of, like,
Mhm.
sadness
Yeah.
or anger or, like, and there was a lot of grief that
Mhm.
came and went throughout my whole process too. Um, but because I can feel more joy and feel that more, like, bigger and deeper, I can feel my other emotions bigger and deeper as well. But I also I actually let myself feel them. I don't suck
Right.
them down and then have them come out sideways later. Like I so even if I'm experiencing them and they feel like so big, I let myself move through it and then I can get to the other side and come back to that kind of neutral place. But I would say too, I definitely and so much of it is rooted in gratitude, but I
Right.
baseline is pretty joyful, I would say.
And so what are your dailies? Kind of do you have some daily habits that keep you grounded in that more joyful space or that gratitude? Or is there some things that are kind of like this is how you run your day that kind of like, atomic habit type things where you're like, this keeps me on the straight and narrow or on the happy as far as happiness goes?
Yeah, well, I meditate every
Mhm,
morning,
mhm,
and not like just like 10 minutes, and it's
uh-huh,
usually guided,
yep,
uh, but that really helps me kind of start my day off. I don't have like easy access to woods, but I get outside and
mhm,
walk as much as
mhm,
I can, and just like outside fresh air, the sun on my
mhm,
skin always makes a big
yep,
difference.
mhm,
And then movement generally too. Like I've been over the past couple months been going to yoga a lot more, and
mhm,
that has
mhm,
become a very spiritual
right,
experience for me
yep,
to be with myself and be with my body that
mhm,
in that way. Um, but yeah, and then just I have lots of really deep sisterhood connections with other
mhm,
in my life, and those are really nourishing and help me, like, just I get to experience life and share it with them and share the
Right.
celebrations and the hard times and all of that, and it's that makes a huge difference in just having people to share all of the parts with, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and that really helps keep me grounded.
Totally. And I think that point you just mentioned is so important because I know for me, when I went through the harder stuff, I really was isolating a ton, right? COVID helped, but then it was like literally if I got COVID, I was like, great, now I've got 10 days to not I have a perfect excuse not to engage with the outside world. Right. It was like good. I can just like stay in my own area. So and that's typically with depression or with anxiety and stuff of this, that there's typically this tendency for people to pull back and pull away and withdraw because they don't want to be even judged more for having these sad feelings, right? And so, and I've learned that that's just the opposite of what you actually the antidote to all that is actually being in community with people that you can be real with, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's important outside your spouse and your kids. I mean, I think it needs to be people that can support you from a, you know, not a neutral place, but a place that they're just on your side. They didn't have to put up with all your crap from the day before, right? Or they don't, right? It's just some and there's some relief and some safety in, especially when you like you talk about you have maybe 4 or 5 close friends and you can meet in kind of some type of way that you can say, "Oh, this is what I'm worried about. This is what I'm concerned about." And it just lets the air out of the balloon a little bit, I think. And it feels and anytime I'm in those situations when I leave, I always feel better. Doesn't matter if I'm sharing or they're sharing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just that like, true human connection
Yep.
is, like, a nutrient that is like
Mhm.
no other, and we need it as we're
Yep.
social beings as humans, we need that, and, to be able to, like, take the mask off, let the guard down, and actually show up as your true, raw, vulnerable self and just be met with like, it's not even about necessarily having someone fix the problem for you, like,
No,
we just
almost never.
seen and heard, like, we
Right,
don't need anyone to do anything.
right.
It's, to express and to be witnessed is so therapeutic in and of itself.
Well, around this thing, I was in a, and still am in a business organization called Young Presidents Organization. It's a worldwide thing for business leaders and owners and stuff like this. But we would do these small groups, which were typically 6 to 8 business people. And it used to be like they used to call it a personal board of directors. Like, so you could tell these people anything because it's 100% highly confidential. In fact, you break confidence, you're out of the deal. There's zero tolerance for anything. So is this really this unique that I haven't necessarily been able to replicate this unique um, group of people that would come together that literally had no um, they were just basically on your not on your side, but they were just there to be open and listen, and the number one thing was we weren't there to fix anybody's problem. It was just and this is I mean, especially for men, this is, like, really foreign, right? I mean, this is like, "Wait, we're not gonna you just told me that business thing, and I can't tell you how to fix it right now? No, no, that's not how this worked." It was just we had to relate to emotion. So, basically, it was the person would start off presenting by saying, "I had to fire this person," or "I'm thinking about firing this person," or "My kid's having an issue with drugs," or because it could go both. It could go business or personal. And then the rest of the group had to key in on the emotion, say, "Man, I remember the last time I felt anxious about XYZ, and this is what I did, or this is what happened to me." And so it was all this sharing versus fixing.
Mhm.
And I watched the difference in the group when we were first formed. There was lots of trying to fix because we just didn't know what we didn't know, and people could leave super deflated because in that environment, if you're like, "Well, you should have you done this? Have you done this? Should you maybe you should do this. Maybe you should do" and it's like and you could just see them the light kinda going down and their light going out in their eyes because like, I'm just an idiot. I should have known better. I should have done this. I should" right? It's almost all this shooting on people was really harmful, but then when we kinda got better at our communication, then it was just all shared experience, and then people came away from amazing experiences because not only was the presenter able to share their stuff, but then everybody else kind of started to unpack their stuff. You could just watch people because it's a feeling and emotion that we could all relate to,
Mhm.
whether it was sadness, grief. And so I think, as we come together with humans, I think I 110% agree with you. And I try to, be better about this with my own wife is just not trying to fix things, but just actually actively listen, ask questions, and then just hold space, walk with, be with, whatever term you want to use, another human being. And that in and of itself is the cure.
100%. Yeah. And there is, I mean, there are times when someone wants like the advice, but they can ask for it. They can
Right.
give the consent, like
Right.
opt into the advice. Like unsolicited advice and problem solving is not something that anybody
Right.
wants, I don't think.
No, they really don't.
But that's something I love about like inside of like coaching spaces and
Yes.
like that of
Yes.
like it's about sharing, bringing things to the table, and then just talking through stuff, maybe being asked some questions so
Right.
that you can come to the realization that you need on your own.
Hmm.
Because we all have like the answers are there
Right.
within us. Sometimes we're just, very disconnected from them or it takes time to find them. But when you discover something for yourself, like work through it, discover it on your own, it lands so much better and feels so much more empowering than, like you said, like if someone's just telling you, oh, you should do this, then you can have that internal talk of like, I should have known better. Why didn't I see that? Like
Right.
this, that, and the other. And so, yeah, I just love a good like connection, sharing, intimate moment. Like, oh,
Hmm.
it fuels me. I love it.
And that's why you're in the coaching space, right? You get
Yeah.
to have that you get to have those moments all the time. That's why you do what you do, right?
Exactly.
I love it, I love it. Well, what piece of, and I'll just open it wide open, so, versus kind of the subject we've been talking about, so it could hit that or any other, but if there was one piece of wisdom that you have gleaned from your years on the earth here that you just wish everybody knew or just everybody really got. Like, it's like, man, I wish everybody like, maybe it's when you're with your coaching clients or in your in the groups that you do, it's like, is there something that you just wish everybody knew? And if they knew this, it would just they'd just be happier, they'd be more fulfilled, they would is there one piece of wisdom you could just mic drop for us here at the end? No pressure,
I was gonna say
no
no
pressure,
pressure, no
no
pressure.
pressure. And I never give anybody the question in advance. So if you haven't listened to my podcast all the way through, you'll never know that I'm gonna drop this on because I want the raw feed, right? I don't want
Yeah,
the meta. So
yeah.
what's the raw feed? So is there something you'd be like, "Man, if everybody knew this, things would just be better."
Well, I first thought, best thought,
Yeah,
and
of course.
connected to what you just
Mhm.
said, right, like, that's what people want you. You're the raw, vulnerable, true, authentic version of you, not what you think you need to create to be liked, loved, worthy, valuable, like, they
Right.
don't actually want that, and God, if I had known that sooner, it would have probably changed the trajectory of my life, who knows, I don't know, but, like, to just trust that you exactly as you are is a gift, like, there isn't anything to change or fix, you're whole and complete exactly as you are, like, that is something that I wish every human knew, like, and not just because it's something too, to be fair, like, you hear that's not
Right.
like you've never heard it before, but to
Right.
really
Know
not
it.
yeah, like, embody it, have it be, like, in your heart, in your soul, in your body, and not just this, like, "Oh, I'm perfect, whole, and complete." Like, okay,
Right. Right.
actually believe
Right.
that I wish every human had that because when you believe that you are worthy and lovable exactly as you are, like, your whole life opens up. There's so much
Mm.
freedom in that, and I want everybody to have it.
And I'm curious, your because you had related to a higher power before. For me, I have that experience is shifting from the love of my wife, the love of my kids, the love of friends, to the love of I'm going to say God in my instance. So the love of God, and that's a different love, and in that then there's freedom in these other relationships for me to be able to have for them to have a tougher conversation with me or me to have a tougher conversation with them because it's coming from a place of love, not a place of lack. I'm not trying to get something from those other relationships. I'm actually, in a way, trying to give something in those other relationships because it's the love of God, not my love, but love coming through me. And it's kind of mixed with mine. It's kind of like this. That's at least what it feels like, towards this human being, this other person, and I had not experienced that way before until the last, like, month or 2, where I'm like, "Okay," because I had the chance to have somebody was having a hard conversation with me, and in it, when I normally would have been, like felt like, "Oh god," this is painful and this hurts and why are you saying this way and what's this mean and and none of that crap was going on. It was I could feel nothing but love. I just said this was with my wife. My wife was telling me some things that I probably normally would not wanted to hear, but it was like when she was telling me, it was she was very upset about it, but I was in the space of just like I kept just saying I hear you and I love you and there's nothing else for me to say. I just love you, right? And she was like, "Why? I'm telling you all these horrible things." And I'm like, "I just love you." Right? And it was very confusing for both of us, honestly, but, I was relating to a good friend of mine that we have deep conversations the next day. I was like, "I don't know why it worked that way because this never happened that way before," but I said, "I just think I'm actually starting to experience this thing that I've thought was just crap or cliche or whatever, the love of God and the love of a higher power." It's like, I think I'm actually experiencing it because I didn't none of it hurt my feelings. I said, "Not even a little bit." That should have really irritated me. These were big buttons she was trying to push. And I
Mhm.
said and she hit those buttons, and it was like they just all went straight down, and it was like, "No, there's" and now tomorrow, she'll probably touch one of them, and I'll fly off and lose it. But in that moment, I got to experience that, and for me, it's like letting go of the past, forgiving myself, accepting forgiveness of others, and then there's this flow that just comes in where I'm just like, "Yeah, I have more energy to wanna give," right? You have
Mhm.
more you just wanna love people more when you're full of love. There's not I don't know how else to say it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I love yeah, it has to pour out
Right.
somewhere. Like, you fill up and, like, your cup runneth over sort of
Yes, yes, of
thing,
course.
and yeah, that's something that as I've been on my own, like, self-love journey and
Uh-huh.
really over these past few months have really gotten, like, deeply connected to love for myself, and to your point, like, it's not just my love
Right.
that I'm experiencing, I can feel that it's
Mhm.
God, higher
Mm,
power, universe, whatever is
mhm,
resonant for you, it's
mhm,
that flowing through me, and I had to like, it took work to get to
mhm.
this place, but I have such trust that, like, I have a note over here on my wall, actually, it says, "My higher power adores me,"
Right. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
and
Yeah,
that's but I feel it, like,
yeah.
I know that I have all of this love for me exactly as I am, like,
Right.
full approval for
Mhm.
every single part of myself, the things I like about myself, the stuff that I don't, all of it, I know that I'm loved for it.
Yes. Right.
And it took a while to get to that.
Yes.
But now because I feel it for myself, that I can offer it up to other people and love them in all of their humanity. Because we've
Mhm,
all got our
mhm.
parts,
Yep.
the dark is all there. And again, some days it's a lot easier to do that
Yes.
than
Yeah.
others, but
Yep.
I have access to it now. And that is something I didn't have in the not so distant past.
Right. I agree. So, yeah, so hopefully that puts not a bow necessarily, but hope. So if we started off the show a little darker and a little deeper on the this is this is how life has been. This is kind of how life can be in the middle of the muck. Hopefully, if you're in the middle of the muck, my hope is that this is that light in the darkness that says, "Hey, it's there's better times a coming as long as you don't try to take an escape route through drugs or alcohol or some hobby you got to stay focused on the who am I and who is the higher power and what does it want for me and what do I want? I mean, just the hard questions, the deeper questions, right? Just continue to focus on those. Then there's great big rewards, I think, on the other side, but nobody could necessarily sees them, right? It's like an internal job. It's like drive the same car, live in the same house, but just happier about it, both of those things, right?
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's very much an inside job.
Yep. Well, sweet. Well, thank you so much, Carly. It's been lovely having you on the show today. Thank you for coming on and sharing some of your wisdom and some of your light. I know your website's carleyweissert.com.
Mm-hmm.
Did I say it fast enough that I said it right? I tried to say it super fast. Your last name is
I
what?
cert.
Weissert. Dang it. See,
You had it
screwed it up. I
before.
had it before. Doggone it. So, carleyweissert.com. Okay. And then we'll put it in the show notes and all that good stuff. But you coach, you primarily work with women, but you also coach people on just the things we've been talking about today, to coach them through those dark times, to coach them into the light. And I'm assuming continue to coach them. I mean, coaching is a booming industry right now, but there's a reason it's a booming industry. It's because it works.
Yeah.
If it didn't work, people wouldn't buy it, right? People wouldn't do it. And I think we're just living in a space now where it's just, like you said, just having people that you can come to, talk to confidentially, be able to share your authentic self, be able to experiment with who you are. I mean, for a lot of me, it was just experimenting in those type settings of who am I really, right? What am I really? Because I don't really know. So how do I find out? And kind of seeing those reflections. So very important stuff you're doing in the world.
Thank you. Yeah, I love it. It's honestly it being coached
Hmm.
changed my life to have that
Right.
space to lean on and or fall back into when I was going through everything. And I still I will very likely have a coach for my whole life because I
Uh huh.
love being the support and being in
Yep.
connection with another human in that way. So to be able to give back to the world in that way is an honor. I love doing it.
Well, I'm sure because you love doing it that you're very good at it and you've helped lots of people. So thank you for continuing to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a part of the Bright Vibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.